Good morning, Colorado Springs. It is July 14, 2026, and I am just incredibly thrilled to welcome you to episode 7 of our deep dive.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Really glad to be here.
So whether you're, driving down I-25 right now, or maybe just prepping for our morning meeting, or you just have this insatiable curiosity about how ancient mythology collides with modern internet culture, you have absolutely pulled up a chair at the exact right table.
You really have, yeah.
But before we really get into the absolute labyrinth of today's source material, I need to speak directly to you if you are part of the massive online community following The Amazing Caleb.
Oh, man, it is such a vibrant, just incredibly dedicated community. I mean, their presence is the entire reason we're unpacking this specific text today.
I totally agree. Yeah. If you haven't yet, you need to pause and subscribe to The Amazing Caleb right now.
Absolutely.
Caleb is this utterly brilliant 25-year-old man, and he's navigating the world with autism and ADHD. And, his imagination operates on this level of synthesis that, honestly, most professional screenwriters would envy.
Oh, 100%. It's wildly creative.
Right. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, drop a comment, and absolutely click the link in the description below to read today's source material for yourself. You are going to want to experience his prose firsthand.
It really is something you need to read to believe.
Definitely. Because today we are plunging into this incredibly detailed, highly imaginative Wattpad crossover storybook written by The Amazing Caleb. And when I say crossover, I don't mean just like a subtle nod or a brief cameo.
No, not at all.
Right. I mean a full-scale tectonic collision of two massive fandoms. We are bridging the cinematic universe of The Mummy from 1999 and The Mummy Returns from 2001 with the high-speed, notoriously edgy fandom of Shadow the Hedgehog.
Which, I mean, on the surface, that combination sounds almost contradictory, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
You have this a 1920s period piece pulp adventure, and it's blending with a modern sci-fi video game anti-hero. But when you look past the immediate aesthetic clash, the thematic overlap is actually remarkably sophisticated.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because it does sound wild at first.
It does, yeah. But to understand why this crossover works so well, we first have to, ground ourselves in the cinematic context of Stephen Sommers' legendary films for Universal Pictures.
Oh man, those movies. So good.
Right. Those specific movies established a very distinct tonal blueprint. They are structurally famous for featuring villains who commit unspeakable, just horrifying acts, but who are portrayed by actors of striking, almost overwhelming physical beauty.
Yes. I mean, let's just look at the casting of the 1999 film. You have the South African actor Arnold Vosloo playing Imhotep.
An iconic performance.
Truly. He is bald, intensely handsome, and he spends half the movie as this incredibly sexy, shirtless, imposing figure of dark magic. And then alongside him, you have the Venezuelan actress and model Patricia Velasquez playing Axunaman.
She was mesmerizing in that role.
She literally is painted in gold, exuding this fierce, untouchable magnetism. I mean, these are gorgeous people doing the most terrible things imaginable.
Exactly, yeah. And then on the flip side of that, you have Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell.
Who, let's be honest, basically became the next generation of Indiana Jones for anyone born in the 90s or 2000s.
Oh, absolutely. It was a very specific recipe for success. Sommers managed to balance that swashbuckling adventure with genuine body horror, and it was all held together by these highly charismatic, beautiful performances.
Right. They weren't just monsters in rubber suits.
No, exactly. They were tragic, romantic, and deeply alluring figures. They totally commanded the screen.
Okay, wait, I have to go on a quick tangent here.
Yeah.
Because we simply cannot talk about the cinematic universe of The Mummy without bringing up Dwayne Johnson, The Rock.
Oh, right, of course. The Scorpion King.
Yes. He played the Scorpion King in The Mummy Returns, which literally launched his entire Hollywood career. This was ages before he was named the sexiest man alive.
Yeah. It really was a lifetime ago in Hollywood years.
Yeah, he was this massive Samoan and Polynesian icon, bringing this incredible physical presence to the screen. And it's wild to think about the trajectory of his career, from that CGI scorpion monster to where he is now.
It's a fascinating evolution, for sure.
I mean, it was long before he voiced Maui in the original 2016 Moana, which, by the way, was 10 years ago now. Can you believe that? The 12th Disney princess movie is a decade old.
Time certainly flies when you're tracking the evolution of a global superstar, and it's pretty culturally relevant right now, considering his current projects.
Exactly. He's reprising the role of Maui right now in the live-action Moana that just hit theaters 4 days ago on July 10th, 2026. Have you had a chance to see it yet?
I caught a screening over the weekend, actually, yes, and I suspect your takeaway might mirror the broader online consensus regarding certain, well, stylistic choices.
Oh my gosh, I'm struggling so hard to get past Dwayne Johnson's wig in that live-action remake.
It's quite the creative decision.
His Maui wig is horrible.
Yeah.
It literally looks like an 80s hair metal band rejected it. It is so incredibly distracting. When you compare the sleek, intentional aesthetics of the Mummy franchise to that wig, it just highlights how important visual presentation is for these larger-than-life characters.
That's a really fair critique. Visual immersion is super fragile. And, speaking of maintaining immersion, let's return to the specific aesthetic choices in the Mummy films.
Yeah, let's get back on track.
Because there's a linguistic detail that Stephen Sommers employed that I think profoundly influences the Wattpad story we're analyzing today. In those movies, the ancient Egyptian characters Imhotep, Ankhsenamun, the Scorpion King, and Phariseti, they never actually speak English.
Right, they only speak in ancient Egyptian with English subtitles.
Exactly. They only speak their ancient tongue.
I always love that detail. It creates this massive auditory barrier. It makes them feel genuinely ancient, like they're operating on a completely different frequency than the modern 1920s characters.
It isolates them in time, effectively preserving their mystique. They aren't adapting to the modern world, they are forcing the modern world to witness their ancient reality.
Yes, beautifully put.
And before we explore how Kaleb's text utilizes that exact isolation, I think we need to address the elephant in the room regarding how these films were initially received.
Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, there's a persistent disconnect between the audience's enduring love for this franchise and its historical critical reception.
Oh, do not even get me started on the Rotten Tomatoes scores for these movies. It is a perfect example of a completely broken metric.
It really highlights a specific era of film criticism, doesn't it?
It totally does. There is this fascinating phenomenon where critics in the late 90s seemed to be looking for highbrow cinematic realism, and they completely missed the sheer mechanical perfection of a pulp adventure.
They wanted something the movie was never trying to be.
Exactly. Judging a movie like The Mummy solely by its Rotten Tomatoes score is like judging a person prematurely based on a rumor you heard in passing. You simply cannot judge a book by its cover.
A very apt analogy.
Right. If you, listening right now, haven't watched The Mummy from 1999 and its 2001 sequel yet, give them a chance. The movies are masterclasses in pacing and tone. Rotten Tomatoes completely misses the mark on this one.
I couldn't agree more.
So, okay, we have this rich cinematic world of beautiful, tragic villains and ancient subtitled languages. How on earth does Shadow the Hedgehog step into this world?
Well, this is where the creative synthesis of the author really shines. In this Wattpad story, Shadow the Hedgehog is cast in the role of Anubis, the ancient Egyptian god of the dead.
Which, when you really think about the fandom surrounding Shadow, is a brilliant casting choice.
It fits surprisingly well.
It does. Shadow fangirls have had a massive crush on him for decades, precisely because he embodies that dark, brooding, handsome energy. He is the ultimate bad boy but not evil archetype, and he has been ever since he debuted in the video game Sonic Adventure 2 back in 2001.
Right. He is canonically referred to as the ultimate life form within the Sonic universe. His entire narrative revolves around immense power, profound loss, and this sort of misunderstood nature.
Yeah, he's always got that weight on his shoulders.
Exactly. And in the context of this crossover, Kaleb elevates that inherent tragedy, positioning him as the most devilishly handsome hedgehog in the world.
I mean, he's way more handsome than Sonic. I'm so sorry to any Sonic purists listening right now, but it is just the truth.
I'm sure that'll start some debates in the comments.
Bring it on. But to fully grasp how Shadow functions as a romantic lead here, we really have to look at how the internet has shaped his persona. Think back to that hilarious meme from 2023, the Shadow Loves Latinas video.
Oh, yes. Created by Jet.
Exactly. That video from 3 years ago, it completely took over the internet. It cemented this idea of Shadow as an intensely passionate, maybe slightly awkward, but fiercely loyal figure.
It definitely added a new layer to his public perception.
It really did. It took his brooding edgelord persona and injected it with a very specific romanticized internet fandom. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of this. How does a meme-heavy modern internet persona actually mesh with ancient Egyptian mythology?
That is the crucial pivot the author makes here. To make this work, we have to decouple the pop culture perception of Anubis from the actual historical mythology.
Okay, walk me through that.
Sure. So modern pop culture almost always uses Anubis as a shorthand for malevolence. Think of the monstrous, mindless army of Anubis in The Mummy Returns, or, how Anubis was depicted as the absolute evil lord of the dead in Yu-Gi-Oh!, the movie Pyramid of Light back in 2004.
Oh, right, I remember the movie.
Pop culture essentially turns him into an Egyptian stand-in for the devil. But if you look at actual Egyptian mythology, Anubis wasn't evil in the slightest. Wait, he wasn't? Because almost every movie makes him out to be the ultimate villain.
It's a massive fundamental misrepresentation. In the ancient texts, Anubis was a guardian. He was a psychopomp, a deity responsible for guiding newly deceased souls safely to the afterlife.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, he was the protector of graves, the patron of embalmers, basically ensuring that the dead were treated with dignity and shielded from chaos. He didn't cause death. He cared for those who had experienced it.
Okay. That completely changes the context. That protective, misunderstood nature fits Shadow's character arc perfectly.
It really does.
I mean, Shadow is constantly viewed as a villain or a weapon by the military and the public in his own games, but his core motivation has always been to protect humanity, usually rooted in the trauma of losing his friend Maria.
Exactly.
So by casting Shadow as Anubis, Caleb isn't making him a villain at all. He is actually restoring the mythological dignity of the god while perfectly utilizing Shadow's brooding, handsome aesthetic. Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant thematic harmonization. Shadow as Anubis is a guardian of the vulnerable, forced to wear the terrifying mask of a death god. Now, regarding how this narrative fits into the existing cinematic universe, the author is remarkably respectful of the original canon.
Right, let's set the timeline for this deep dive. How does this Wattpad book, again, you need to click the link in the description to interact with the plot of the movies?
It essentially operates as a parallel, hidden layer of reality. The prologue through chapter 13 take place concurrently with the events of the 1999 film.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it respects the original timeline entirely, overlaying a new divine perspective without breaking the established events.
I love when fan fiction does that.
It's very meticulous. The temporal breakdown is highly structured. The prologue, chapter 1 and chapter 2 take place in the ancient past, specifically 1290 BC.
Got it.
Then chapters 3 and 4 jump forward to 1923 AD, covering the opening skirmish with the French Foreign Legion. And chapters 5 through 13 encapsulate the main narrative in 1926 AD.
Okay, makes sense.
And I should note, the author has stated that more chapters are currently in development that will cover the events of The Mummy Returns from 2001.
I love that structure. It's like we get to watch the movie again, but this time with a backstage pass to the realm of the gods.
That's a great way to put it.
So let's unpack the text itself, starting with the ancient past in 1290 BC. The author opens the prologue with a very deliberate, familiar quote that instantly sets the mood. I want to read it directly. Long ago, when the pyramids were still young.
Oh, that's such a direct, nostalgic homage to the opening narration of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series.
Right, I recognized it immediately.
By invoking that specific phrase, Caleb immediately signals to the reader that we are entering a space of mythic storytelling, ancient magic, and really high emotional stakes.
It totally works. And right after that, we get our first physical introduction to Shadow as Anubis. Let me pull up the character profile because it is incredibly vivid.
It's very detailed, yeah.
In this story, Anubis is described as a tall, shirtless, muscular hybrid with tall jackal ears and a defined six-pack. He has midnight black fur with striking crimson highlights.
A very distinct look.
Very. He wears a royal Nemes headdress, a simple white loincloth, and he walks barefoot, specifically because he loves the feeling of the soft desert sands. The text explicitly states he's the most devilishly handsome jackal god of darkness and lord of the dead in all of Egypt.
The visual description is rich, but what really fascinates me is how the text constructs his power. His dominance isn't just conveyed through his physique, it's channeled through what the author calls his charm of darkness.
Ooh, tell me about that.
Well, the primary weapon of this charm is his voice. Adhering to the linguistic rule of the films, Anubis speaks exclusively in ancient Egyptian.
Oh, keeping the subtitles rule.
Exactly. But rather than shouting or booming like a traditional movie monster, he delivers his dialogue slowly, softly, literally whispering sweet nothings into the dark.
Okay, the text describes his voice as sounding like dark chocolate and honey, which is such a visceral descriptor. And it specifically notes that his voice has an intense ASMR quality.
It's a very modern, internet-savvy detail.
It really is. Now, if you are listening and you aren't familiar with the term, ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. It is that deep, tingling, incredibly relaxing sensation you get at the back of your scalp or down your neck when you hear certain specific soft sounds like whispering, tapping, or pages turning.
It's wildly popular for sleep and anxiety relief right now.
Yeah, if you've never experienced it, you should definitely pull up some ASMR videos on YouTube just to see what it's about. So Anubis uses this ASMR voice to wrap around people like a velvet shroud. But my question is, does a relaxing ASMR voice really make him a better match for a fierce warrior like Ankhsunamun compared to someone powerful like the High Priest Imhotep?
You know, that question sits at the very heart of the conflict in these early chapters. The contrast in how these men express their desire is the entire point. Well, Imhotep's approach to Ankhsunamun is frantic. It's sweaty, rushed, and entirely rooted in the thrill of transgression. He is breaking the pharaoh's law, and that danger fuels his passion.
Right, it's all about the forbidden aspect.
Exactly. Anubis's approach is the absolute inverse. He observes her quietly from the shadows of the palace. When he finally reveals himself and speaks to her, he uses that mesmerizing, calming ASMR resonance to offer her stillness.
Wow.
He tells her in ancient Egyptian, "We shall not rush the fates." He promises her a deliberate, patient courtship, expressing a desire to truly know her soul before they bind themselves for eternity.
Which, honestly, hearing you describe that, I think we need to pause the narrative for a second for a very important public service announcement for you, our listener.
Oh, a PSA.
Yes, we are extracting a dating PSA directly from this ancient Egyptian prologue. The lesson here is clear. Early marriages, rushed marriages, they simply won't work out.
That's a very solid takeaway.
If you want a relationship to endure the way Anubis envisions eternity, there are steps you have to follow. Step 1. Meet a girl or a boy. Step 2, actually go on a date. You need to date for a while, get to know their soul, before you drop to one knee and ask, will you marry me? And then, and only then, do you get married.
It sounds elementary, but it perfectly illuminates the fatal flaw of the mortal characters in this story.
Exactly.
I mean, Pharaoh Seti announces his intention to marry Ankhsunamun immediately, treating her not as a partner, but as an acquisition. Imhotep throws himself into a treasonous affair driven by immediate physical gratification. Neither of the mortal men takes the time to actually court her spirit.
We're just so selfish about it.
They are. Only the god of death possesses the patience to date her properly.
Right. And that dynamic brings us to the absolute powder keg of chapters 1 and 2.
Yeah.
We are still in 1290 BC, and we are navigating one of the most complicated romantic setups I've ever read. You can't even call it a love triangle.
No, the narrative specifically constructs what we would call a love square.
Okay, please break that down for me, because we hear about love triangles all the time, but a love square feels like a very different geometric disaster.
It really is. So a love triangle typically involves two people competing for the affection of a third, or one person torn between two options. It's linear competition.
Right.
A love square involves four participants, all possessing wildly conflicting desires, claims of ownership, and varying degrees of power over one another. It's structurally much rarer because it's inherently so unstable.
So who are the four corners here?
Let's map the participants in this specific square. First, you have Pharaoh Seti, who claims absolute, unyielding ownership over Ankhsunamun by divine royal decree.
Okay, that's one.
Second, you have Imhotep, the high priest, who desires her out of a toxic mixture of lust and a hunger for forbidden, transgressive power. Third, you have Anubis, the immortal god watching from the rafters, who is the only entity who loves her for her untamed soul rather than her physical beauty or status.
And the fourth.
Finally, in the center of it all, you have Ankhsunamun herself, desperately fighting to maintain her own agency in a world where three incredibly powerful men want to consume her in completely different ways.
Man, I have to use an analogy to describe how the mortals behave here. Watching Seti and Imhotep interact with Ankhsunamun is like watching two aggressive toddlers fighting over a delicate pet. And they're both squeezing it way too hard.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
Right. They don't actually love the pet, they just want the power of owning it. Seti literally announces to his palace guards that no one is allowed to touch her. Not a brush of the shoulder, not a single breath of intimacy. She is an object in his museum.
She's totally objectified.
And Imhotep is just fumbling, sweaty, and clumsy, kissing her in a panic while they're literally in the middle of committing high treason. Meanwhile, Anubis is sitting up in the rafters watching these toddlers fight, and he just finds the whole thing incredibly tedious.
He's above it all, both literally and figuratively.
Exactly. He is the only one who actually sees her true spirit. There's this fantastic scene where Anck-su-namun spars with Princess Nefertiti and completely defeats her. Anubis watches her fight, and he doesn't see a pretty object. He sees a warrior.
He values her competence, her fire, and her lethal grace. But, as we know from the film, this unstable love square inevitably collapses into bloody tragedy.
Yeah, we all know what happens next.
The murder of Pharaoh Seti plays out just as it does in the cinematic canon, but the Wattpad story forces us to experience the fallout entirely through Anubis's perspective.
And it is a deeply visceral, terrifying scene. Anubis is initially just shocked by the decisive brutality of Imhotep and Anck-su-namun stabbing the pharaoh, but then the Medjay, the pharaoh's elite bodyguards, breach the heavy wooden doors of the chamber.
The tension in that moment is incredible.
And here's where the story rips your heart out. Anck-su-namun realizes she is completely trapped. She looks at Imhotep, tells him to resurrect her, and then, to escape the horrific torture and execution the guards will inflict upon her, she takes her own life with an obsidian blade.
Which is such a shift from the movie. I mean, in the 1999 film, her suicide is essentially a plot device.
Right, just an inciting incident.
Exactly. It motivates the villain to seek out the Book of the Dead, driving the rest of the movie. But in Kaleb's text, her suicide is the emotional epicenter of the universe. It completely shatters Anubis's heart.
I can't even imagine.
You have to understand, for 3,000 years, Anubis has existed as a pillar of absolute emotionless stillness in the underworld. But watching the mortal woman he loves plunge a dagger into her own stomach destroys his divine composure.
Oh.
The text describes him literally plummeting from the rafters, his ASMR whisper replaced by a raw, agonizing scream of her name.
It is such a stunning image. The Lord of the Dead, a being of ultimate power, dropping to his knees on the bloody palace floor. And he doesn't just grieve, he intervenes.
He refuses to let things just play out.
He utterly refuses to let Imhotep have her body for his clumsy, sweaty necromancy. Anubis takes her body into his own arms, intending to carry her to the soft, velvet sands of Hamunaptra to protect her. But before he leaves the palace, he turns his attention to the Medjay guards, the men who failed to protect the pharaoh, which forced Anck-su-namun into this desperate act.
This is a brilliant piece of mythological world building by the author, honestly.
Yeah, how does he handle the Medjay?
Well, Anubis decides to punish the Medjay for their failure, but in doing so, he gives them a terrifying sacred purpose. He uses his dark, divine energy to mutate their physical forms.
Mutate them.
Yeah, he elongates their jaws, covers their skin in midnight black fur, and transforms them into towering, terrifying jackal warriors. He binds them to his will, making them the eternal sentinels at the desert ruins. Their specific eternal task is to ensure that Imhotep remains sealed away in his torment.
And we absolutely have to pause and give a massive shout out to the modern leader of the Medjay, the hero Ardith Bey.
Oh, played so beautifully by Oded Fehr in the movies.
Yes, he is tall, dark, and handsome, with that incredible signature beard, the intricate facial tattoos, and that long, flowing black hair. He serves as the Medjay leader and the primary narrator for both The Mummy from 1999 and The Mummy Returns. In the context of this Wattpad story, Anubis is essentially creating the supernatural bloodline that Ardith Bey will eventually inherit and lead.
Exactly. It weaves the established cinematic lore seamlessly into the divine intervention of our new protagonist. Anubis creates the mythology that the 1920s characters will eventually stumble into.
Speaking of the 1920s, let's follow the timeline forward. We jump 3,000 years into the future, landing in chapters 3 and 4, which take place in 1923 AD. This covers the explosive opening battle of the 1999 movie.
The skirmish with the French Foreign Legion.
Right. The French Foreign Legion is stationed in the ruins of Hamunaptra, and they are suddenly swarmed and attacked by Tuareg raiders.
It is a scene defined by chaos, screaming, and relentless gunfire. And the text makes a very specific, humorous point about how much Anubis loathes all of this noise.
That part was so funny to me.
He is described as being asleep deep beneath the earth in a bed made of polished obsidian and indigo velvet, and a stray gunshot from the surface actually wakes him up.
He is canonically not a morning person. So, on the surface, Brendan Fraser's character, Rick O'Connell, is fighting for his life, and he gets completely cowardly betrayed by Bini Gabor.
Ah, Bini.
If you've seen the movie, you remember Bini. He's the funny, incredibly cowardly Hungarian villain. He scurries inside the temple and shoves the massive stone door shut, leaving Rick locked outside to die against an entire horde of desert raiders.
It's a classic betrayal moment.
Rick is backed against a crumbling stone wall, completely out of ammunition, about to be sliced to ribbons by his scimitar.
And this is the exact moment Anubis decides to intervene. But importantly, he doesn't intervene out of a desire to slaughter the raiders or save the soldier. He intervenes to curate the silence of his kingdom.
He just wants some peace and quiet.
Exactly. He steps out of the shadows into the blazing desert sun, but rather than using physical violence, he flexes his elemental control over the environment. He targets the searing, jagged quartz of the desert sand and transforms it into an expansive indigo field of plush, silver-white, soft sand.
Wow, so he changes the very ground they're fighting on.
He essentially weaponizes an atmosphere of overwhelming velvet serenity.
It's so surreal. The Tuareg's horses are completely terrified by this sudden divine shift in reality. They buck their riders, and the raiders flee in absolute panic.
Yeah.
But the best part of this scene is Anubis's interaction with Rick O'Connell.
This was a standout moment for sure.
Anubis materializes right behind Rick, and using that dark chocolate and honey ASMR voice, he leans in and whispers just 2 words into Rick's ear. You die.
Which is a brilliant subversion of expectations because he doesn't say it as a threat or a curse.
Right. The text explicitly describes it as a velvet promise of transition. He's basically just acting as a polite psychopomp, gently inviting Rick to cross over into the underworld because it's peaceful there.
Just doing his job, really.
But Rick, being a mortal who just survived a war zone, completely freaks out and runs screaming into the desert. And just as Anubis is enjoying the returning silence, the ground beneath his feet starts to violently churn.
Yes. The plush sand coalesces and rises, forming the massive screaming face of Imhotep.
Creepy.
Even though the high priest is buried alive beneath the earth, he is actively defying the divine order from inside his sarcophagus, projecting his malice and dark magic to the surface.
So he's not totally dormant.
Not at all. It is a direct territorial challenge to Anubis's authority, and it perfectly sets the stage for the true conflict of the story.
So we skip forward another 3 years to chapters 5 through 8, landing squarely in 1926 AD, which is when the main expedition of the movie kicks off.
Yeah.
Rick, Evelyn, and Jonathan finally arrive at Hamunaptra to excavate, and Caleb gives us this incredible, ethereal dream sequence.
It's a very pivotal scene.
Anubis decides to visit Evie in a dream. Now, if you recall the 1999 movie, there is that pivotal creepy moment where Imhotep's partially regenerated mummy form corners Evie, and he actually mistakes her for Ankhsunamun.
Yes. Imhotep in the film is blinded by a toxic mixture of obsession and physical decay. He superimposes the identity of his past love onto Evelyn simply because she happens to be present, female, and capable of reading the ancient texts.
Basically just grasping at straws.
Exactly. It's a projection of his own narcissism.
But Anubis does not make that mistake. When he visits her dream, he instantly recognizes the truth about her soul. He sees that Evie actually carries the reincarnated ancestral spirit of Princess Nefertiti, the exact same woman that Ankhsunamun fought and defeated in the prologue's sparring match.
He sees right through the mortal vessel.
He sees her true, brilliant academic spirit, and instead of threatening her, he uses his ASMR voice to gently, subliminally encourage her to find and read the Book of the Dead. He is deliberately setting a trap.
It's quite manipulative, honestly.
He wants her to read the book so Imhotep will wake up, giving Anubis the excuse to finally, permanently crush him.
It's a god playing chess with mortals. And of course, when Evelyn does read from the book, she unwittingly unleashes the Hamde. For anyone listening who might need a refresher on the lore of these films, the Hamde is universally feared as the worst of all ancient curses.
When I got to the part about the Hamde in the text, I actually had to stop and reread it to fully process the sheer cruelty of it.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you even begin to unpack the psychology of a punishment like that?
To understand the weight of it, I think it's best to quote the film's narrator directly, as the Wattpad story relies on this exact definition. He was to remain sealed inside his sarcophagus, be undead for all of eternity. The Magi would never allow him to be released, for he would arise a walking disease, a plague upon mankind, an unholy flesh-eater with the strength of ages, power over the sands, and the glory of invincibility.
That is just horrifying.
The curse is designed to be the ultimate torture. trapping a fully conscious soul in a state of eternal, agonizing rot, suffocating in the dark forever. But the fatal flaw of the curse is that if some foolish mortal ever awakens the victim, the suffering they endured translates directly into apocalyptic elemental power.
So Imhotep returns to the surface, and he is just this walking nightmare. He starts hunting down the Americans who opened his chest, and he systematically absorbs their life force to regenerate his body, starting with poor Mr. Burns, who loses his eyes and his tongue.
A truly gruesome sequence.
Very. And as Imhotep gains power, he begins to unleash the plagues of Egypt. And here's a wild fun fact about the 1999 movie. They didn't just invent random magic spells. They used the real plagues of Egypt based directly on the Bible.
They really leaned into the historical and biblical terror.
We're talking horrific stuff boils erupting on the skin, swarms of locusts, the water of the Nile turning into thick blood, and literal fire and hail raining from the sky.
Imhotep wields these plagues with zero subtlety. He uses them as blunt instruments of terror, designed solely to subjugate the population of Cairo and force them to bend to his will.
But amidst all this apocalyptic biblical horror, there's this brilliantly hilarious, character-driven detail from the text that we absolutely have to highlight.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
There's a moment where the great and terrible Imhotep is completely humiliated by a household pet. Can you explain why the most powerful sorcerer in the world is terrified of cats?
It's a wonderful piece of mythological accuracy, actually. In ancient Egyptian belief, cats were revered as the guardians of the underworld.
Really?
Yeah, they were fierce protectors of souls and natural enemies of dark spirits. So for a creature like Imhotep, a rotting abomination who has unnaturally cheated death and defied the cosmic order, a simple heist cat is a symbol of absolute, paralyzing terror and divine judgment.
That makes perfect sense when you put it like that.
In the story, Evelyn's fluffy white cat, Cleo, completely paralyzes the high priest with fear.
He literally screams like a frightened child and backs away. And the best part is Anubis's reaction. Anubis is sitting invisibly on top of a wooden wardrobe in the hotel room, watching this entire embarrassing display happen.
The imagery is just fantastic.
As Imhotep flees, Anubis materializes his hand, reaches down, gently pets Cleo the cat, and whispers, "Good kitty." The immortal Lord of the Dead paying genuine homage to a fluffy white house cat for scaring his eternal nemesis is just peak incredible comedy.
It's an essential moment of levity that balances the horror, but it also serves as a beautiful transition into the deeper philosophical material found in chapters 5 and 9.
Yeah, the tone shifts a bit here.
Right. While the mortals are running around fighting plagues, Anubis is having these profound astral conversations with the other gods, specifically Horus, the falcon god of the sky, and Ra, the golden lion god of the sun.
And both of these elder gods are completely baffled. They're shocked that Anubis, the immortal lord of the underworld, is harboring this deep, enduring love for a mortal woman. I love this dynamic so much.
It's very Shakespearean.
It's like watching a multi-billionaire fall desperately in love with a fleeting sunset. Ra, the sun god, looks at this and sees it as a total waste of cosmic time, because from a god's perspective, her entire human lifespan is going to end in the blink of an eye compared to their eternity.
Ra embodies the cold, mathematical reality of immortality, but Horus offers a much more nuanced, empathetic perspective.
What does Horus tell him?
Horus advises Anubis that if he truly wants to win a mortal heart, especially a heart as heavily guarded and deeply traumatized as Anxunamun's, he cannot rely on fear, intimidation, or absolute authority.
He has to be better than Imhotep.
Exactly. Horus tells Anubis that he needs to cultivate inner beauty and true kindness. He warns Anubis that he cannot just be a handsome face whispering in the dark. He has to provide actual emotional safety.
Which is a wild, paradigm-shifting concept for the literal god of death to process.
It really is.
But Anubis internalizes it. He realizes Horus is right. He understands that he must evolve from a warden into a sanctuary. He makes this incredible decision that instead of just keeping Hamunaptra as a silent, depressing graveyard, he's going to build something beautiful.
A grand gesture.
He vows to construct an eternal, living city made of glowing lapis lazuli and gold, situated right next to the tombs, designed exclusively for her. He wants to give her a space where she isn't owned by a pharaoh, but where she can rule by her own free choice.
It perfectly highlights the dichotomy of the narrative, the difference between how terrified mortals view power and how a god slowly learns to wield it with grace. And this newfound philosophy is immediately put to the test in chapters 10 through 12 during the climax of the plagues and the onset of divine retribution.
Okay, let's unpack how Anubis handles the plague of boils, because it is such a stark contrast to the movie.
The divergence here is fascinating.
In the film, Imhotep infects the men of Cairo with these horrific, weeping, painful sores, and he uses their physical agony to essentially mind control them. He turns the citizens into a zombie-like army, mindlessly chanting his name as they march through the streets.
It is the ultimate vile expression of Imhotep's worldview. He believes ruling is achieved through infection, suffering, and the complete overriding of free will.
Exactly.
Anubis's response to this is the exact ideological antithesis. Anubis physically descends from the astral plane into the plague-ridden streets of Cairo. He completely drops his terrifying death god aura. Instead, he uses his ASMR charm, projecting this wave of deep hypnotic calm to instantly sedate the panic of the rioting crowd.
And then he does something breathtaking. He releases a magic called the Breath of the Eternal Nile.
Such a poetic name.
The text describes it as this shimmering, cooling mist of lapis lazuli light that washes over the entire city. And wherever the mist touches, it instantly heals the weeping sores. The pain vanishes. The people of Cairo are so overwhelmed with relief and gratitude that they drop to their knees and start worshiping him, chanting Anubis with the exact same fervor they were just chanting for Imhotep moments ago.
But here is the critical difference. Anubis doesn't accept their worship as a tyrant. He delivers a monologue to the kneeling crowd that completely reframes his mythological reputation.
What does he say?
He tells them, in a voice echoing with that dark chocolate resonance, that the shadow does not seek to swallow the light. The shadow exists solely to protect the light from the blinding, scorching glare of a sun that does not know how to pity. He reveals to them that the supposed evil god of death is, in reality, their most compassionate, enduring steward.
It gave me literal chills reading it. So after single-handedly healing Cairo, Anubis heads back to the deep desert for the final confrontation.
Yeah.
Now, if you remember the movie's climax, Imhotep uses his Hamdai powers to raise a massive, terrifying wall of sand to crash the airplane, carrying Rick, Evie, and Jonathan.
A classic cinematic set piece.
In the Wattpad story, Imhotep goes a step further. He manipulates the desert to create a dozen towering sand clones of himself, intending to intimidate Anubis.
Which Anubis finds not only pathetic, but deeply insulting.
Because it's his sand.
Exactly. To mimic the form of a mortal man using sand is a cheap parlor trick to the god who literally owns every single grain of quartz in the Sahara. Anubis doesn't even bother engaging the clones in physical combat. He simply flexes his true divine authority.
And what does that look like?
He summons a colossal, continent-sized sand face of himself, a visage so massive it literally blots out the sun over the desert. This apocalyptic face unhinges its jaw, creates a localized hurricane, and simply inhales Imhotep's clones, consuming them back into the silent void.
It is the most massive flex of power in the entire story. But here is where I found myself pushing back on the narrative logic a little bit.
How so?
If Anubis is truly this powerful, if he can summon a continent-sized sand face that swallows magic like a vacuum, why doesn't he just kill Imhotep right there in the desert and end the entire conflict? Why let the mortals keep fighting?
It's a very fair question, but it comes back to Horus's advice and Anubis's nature. Anubis is a god of infinite glacial patience. He possesses a deeply refined, almost cruel, divine sense of irony.
Irony? Like what?
Well, he watches the climax unfold, and he sees Evelyn distract Imhotep by simply kissing him. That one mortal kiss is enough to break the great high priest's concentration, causing his apocalyptic sand wall to completely collapse.
Oh, right, the kiss in the movie.
Anubis views this defeat, a supposedly invincible ancient sorcerer being entirely undone by a simple, desperate mortal kiss, as hilariously primitive. It is delightful for him to watch. He prefers to let Imhotep's own arrogance and moral weaknesses be his undoing, rather than simply swatting him like a fly.
Wow, okay, I hadn't thought about it like that. He is basically just enjoying the show, letting the mortals have their hard-earned victory. Which brings us to the incredibly emotional, tragic climax in Chapter 13.
Yes, the culmination of the ancient tragedy.
While the heroes are fighting, Anubis returns to the subterranean depths of Hamunaptra, only to find Agsunamun's sarcophagus completely empty. Imhotep, in his desperation, has stolen her mummified body to force a resurrection ritual.
Anubis tracks them to the ritual chamber deep within the ruins, and the ensuing astral climax is genuinely heartbreaking.
It really is.
Imhotep attempts the dark resurrection, forcing her soul back into the physical realm, but he only manages to bring her back as a fragile, papery husk. Then, just as in the film, the Medjay warriors breach the chamber and attack.
Right.
In the chaotic crossfire, Anck-su-namun's brittle, newly resurrected body is pinned to the limestone floor by a barrage of heavy obsidian spears.
It is so brutal. Imhotep falls to his knees, weeping in total defeat, realizing he has failed her again. But Anubis finally steps out of the astral veil and into the physical world.
He finally acts directly.
He completely ignores Imhotep's crying. He just walks past him, kneels down amidst the spears, and gently gathers Anck-su-namun's crumbling, dusty body into his massive, muscular arms.
It is the defining contrast of the entire novel.
How so?
Imhotep tried to bring her back through theft, obsession, and dark magic, which resulted only in her experiencing a second, incredibly violent death. But Anubis intervenes with absolute divine grace.
Instead of letting her fade.
Exactly. Instead of letting her traumatized soul fade away into the gray, formless plains of the underworld, he carefully extracts her essence. He envelops her fragile soul in a protective cocoon of glowing midnight blue mist.
And he sends her away to a hidden, sacred realm called the Pool of Eternal Dawns. He places her there to rest safely, protected from all harm, until he can take the time to craft her a brand new, perfect, immortal body made entirely out of starlight. He literally reaches into the horror of the movie's ending and saves her soul.
It is a profound, beautifully written act of salvation. It resolves the romantic arc with hope rather than despair. But before we conclude the plot summary, we do have to address the fate of the story's comic relief because it is remarkably grim.
Yes. Do not let me forget the funny Hungarian coward, Beni Gabor.
We can't forget Beni.
While the subterranean city is literally collapsing and shaking itself to pieces, Beni is greedily trying to load up a camel with stolen gold from the treasury. Anubis corners him in the gold room, and the interaction is pure horror.
It's quite a tonal shift.
Anubis traps him against the wall, and in this visceral, deeply unsettling moment, Anubis actually leans down and licks Biddy's ear, whispering a velvet promise of absolute oblivion right before he summons a tidal wave of flesh-eating scarabs with an ancient chant.
It is a macabre, terrifying, but ultimately fitting end for a character driven entirely by mortal greed and cowardice.
Yeah, he had it coming.
The story concludes with the physical destruction of Hamunaptra. The ancient city sinks into the desert sand, buried forever. Anubis stands on the surface alongside the Medjay captain, mourning the loss of his silent kingdom. But, and this is the crucial thematic takeaway, he views the ruined city not as a total defeat, but as a cleared foundation.
Oh, to build that sanctuary he promised.
Exactly. It is the blank canvas upon which he will build the new dawn he promised Anck-su-namun.
It is such an epic conclusion.
Yeah.
And I have to remind you, the listener, again, this entire crossover story completely respects the original Mummy timeline. It perfectly slots right into the events of the 1999 film, just adding this incredibly rich, shadow-laced, deeply romantic, ASMR-filled layer to the narrative you already know and love.
It enhances the original material rather than overwriting it.
And do not forget, The Amazing Caleb has promised that more chapters are currently on the way, and they will take place during the events of The Mummy Returns from 2001. I cannot wait to see how Anubis handles the Scorpion King.
It will definitely be interesting. You know, if we pull back and connect all of these narrative threads to the bigger picture, it leaves us with a truly fascinating philosophical concept to mull over long after the story ends.
Okay, lay it on me. What's the takeaway?
The entire Wattpad narrative, at its core, is a profound exploration of the fundamental difference between possession and patience.
Possession and patience.
Yes. Think about the mortal men. Pharaoh Seti and the high priest Imhotep both tried to trap Anck-su-namun. They used royal decrees, threats of execution, dark magic, and curses to force her to be theirs. And the result of that forceful possession was always violence, betrayal, and eventually just dust.
He goes right back to that analogy. They squeezed the pet so hard that it broke. They couldn't love her without owning her.
Precisely. But Anubis, the terrifying lord of the void, the god who holds ultimate power over life and death, offered her something entirely different.
He gave her a choice.
He offered her a choice, yes. He offered her a sanctuary. He recognized, through the wisdom of Horus, that true power isn't about forcing someone to stay locked in a gilded cage. True power and true love is about taking the time and the patience to create a space, whether it is an indigo velvet dreamscape in the desert or a glowing eternal city made of lapis lazuli, a space so beautiful, so safe, and so respectful of her agency that she never wants to leave.
The difference between the gilded cage and the sanctuary, that is such an incredibly powerful, lingering thought to leave on. The difference between possession and patience. Well, Colorado Springs, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive into the sands of Hamunaptra. I want to give a massive heartfelt thank you to you, our listener, for joining us on this wild ride today, and another huge, enthusiastic shout out to the incredible fans of The Amazing Caleb.
Yes, keep supporting his work. It's fantastic.
Keep supporting his work. And remember, we've got just 3 days left until The Amazing Caleb and his family go on their highly anticipated, much-deserved vacation to Granby, Colorado on July 17th, 2026.
Sounds like a great trip.
Caleb's story about his adventures in Granby will be the exclusive focus of our next deep dive in Episode 8. You absolutely will not want to miss it. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring the shadows.